Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by SecuriCentrix. SecuriCentrix is a trusted cybersecurity company with offices in Dublin, Cape Town, and London. SecuriCentrix provides expert advisory services, primarily in the finance and fintech industries, with tailored security solutions to fit your specific needs and regulatory challenges. On the show this week, we've got Sean Lee, co-founder of Odsy Network. On the show, as part of the Techstars Web3 Community Series events we're doing on Crowdcast in support of the Techstars Web3 Accelerator that I'm running. Sean is a former CEO of the Algorand Foundation. He's an accomplished executive in Web3 innovation and fintech, and is a senior advisor for the Crypto Council for Innovation. Sean is also a mentor at the Crypto Impact and Sustainability Accelerator at the World Economic Forum, and with the MIT Entrepreneurship and Fintech Innovation Node. In this episode, Sean and I riff on his vision for universal access and Web3, and some of the Web3 scenarios where universal access will make a big difference, how early-stage founders should be thinking about accessibility when they're designing their platforms and roadmaps, how advocacy and collaboration will drive global adoption of crypto and Web3, and what he looks for in Web3 founders. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm Pete Townsend. I am the managing director of the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. I'm here with Sean Lee, one of the co-founders of the Odsy Network. How you doing today, Sean?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome to have you here. So we are talking about making Web3 universally accessible today. And we're doing this in support of the Techstars Web3 Accelerator community series that we've launched to deliver some insights from the leaders on the front line of Web3 back to the community to help them as they're navigating their way through the early stages of their startup or early stages of learning about Web3 and figuring this whole space out. One of the big investors in this space who I think that you know well, Sean, is Chris Dixon from A16Z, who said he's never met anyone in this space who is both skeptical and informed. So let's let's do our best to inform today. But
all right,
to kick things off, just so folks know where we are investing in Techstars Web3 is in the decentralized internet and those building the decentralized internet and tokenized economies. And what you're doing with Odsy Network is critically important to where that's going. We're going to dig into that a bit. But before we do that, maybe just talk us through, after 20 plus years in enterprise software and services, was there a singular moment that got your head down the blockchain rabbit hole that inspired you to go in this direction?
Great question. I mean, I think I ask myself that question all the time. Like to, every now and then do a little bit of a retrospective kind of look back and see how things are and how potentially the future may hold for me. I'd say, I wouldn't call it a rabbit hole, to be honest. It was a gradual progression towards where I ended up being today. And I think a lot of that has to do with both the education, the experience, and the mentors that I've had along the way that have really helped me guide towards, what I have always been attracted to and curious about, which is the technology innovation that pushes real world use cases, right? I think, if we look back, and you kind of gave away my age already when you talked about 20 some odd years of working. But I mean, I think I've been very fortunate to kind of got out of college and stepped right into kind of Internet 1.0, right? And this is in the mid 90s. This is when people are starting to realize this internet, this World Wide Web, this way of communicating from one person to another or machine to another, that can literally happen globally without any borders and without any restrictions. Now, that was kind of the beginning of how we've got to, what people would know as Web 1, Web 2, and now Web 3. But I think the reality is everything is stacked on top of each other, right? I love it when people ask me, why do you think Web 2 is so bad and Web 3 is so good? I'm like, well, I've never said that, and I'll never say that, right? All of these are stacked on top of each other. These are innovations that allow us to do the next phase and the next phase and the next thing after that. So my career has always been very much around the distributed internet, borderless communications, the enablement of information across the network. I've gone through, the crazy .com age. I've gone through the e-commerce age, the social media age. Before I got to blockchain and crypto, I actually spent about 10, 15 years in cloud computing and open source technology. Which, as we know, if we look at blockchain and crypto today, very much every bit of information is open source, and that's a foregone conclusion now. And at the same time, information and value exchange that are happening within these networks are certainly part and parcel towards all of these cloud-enabled technologies that we know and we don't even question these days, right? I mean, you and I, if we are having this conversation 10 years ago, people will be asking, is cloud safe?
Oh, yeah.
What about privacy and all of those things? Now, some people still ask it, but I think the volume of kind of complaints or curiosity have certainly died down, because it's a technology that people have accepted as to be mature and also, there for us to use. You pick up a mobile phone, everything is already connected to the cloud. I think blockchain and crypto needs to go through that phase. And I think I've just been very fortunate to be able to kind of traverse through all that and end up to be where I am today.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I remember as early as 8 years ago, when I was still in industry with a big bank, what probably was the best piece of software for us to use for a certain thing, the answer from HQ was, sorry, it's cloud, no. Right? That was 8 years ago. Yeah. And we were already 5 years into the crypto journey at that point, the blockchain journey at that point. But you're right. This needs to start in an environment, in a zone where people feel safe. How people feel safe is all according to your risk appetite. That risk appetite of yourself as an individual is reflected by the institutions you work for, perhaps the startup you work for, the startup you're leading. So it's different strokes for different folks, right?
For sure.
Absolutely. So Sean, when you and I chatted first, and I've been sharing this with a few folks, and first of all, shout out to Niall Dennehy from AidTech, Techstars grad from a few years ago who introduced us and brought us together. So thank you to Niall. I'm saying thank you to Niall Dennehy at least once a month these days in terms of the introductions he makes for me, which are fantastic. So
Niall's a good man.
Absolutely. Great guy. And that having that first chat was really a unique learning point for me in the conversation that I had with you, and then a conversation I had with a couple of others as well. So what I mean by that is that building a layer one blockchain as a universal access layer, right? That when you first set out to say, listen, I want to solve this problem of universal access, or when you and your colleagues said that, you looked at the layer ones that are out there and you're kind of like, well, you know what? We probably are better off doing our own thing here, because for what you really truly want to deliver, not all layer ones are architected and designed and built the same way, right? So, can you talk about your vision for universal access and why you think that it's going to make a big difference?
Certainly. So maybe I preclude this by saying, kind of my view on the layer one ecosystem today. And keep in mind, I used to run one of them. I was the CEO of the Algorand Foundation for a number of years, and very reputable blockchain, tremendous technology, and still running, it's still one of the most, from a traffic perspective, one of the top blockchains out there. Now, if you think about the ecosystem, however, we do realize there are some deficiencies in terms of how each layer ones are interoperating within each other. Now, by that, what I mean, though, is there's a lot of fragmentation, both in terms of developing applications within each one of the layer ones, creating new value on each one of the layer ones, and potentially transacting them between networks. But then more importantly, if you think about what blockchain and crypto is all about, it's about creating value that are transacted in an immutable public blockchain. And when you have all of these different layer ones that are somewhat fragmented, some would say very fragmented, then you're essentially creating lots of different silos where value and innovation are being kept and trapped, in a sense. So when my co-founder and I are looking at creating something new, we obviously weren't sitting down with a mindset that, let's just go create another layer one that's faster and cheaper and more decentralized, or whatever the buzzword happens to be. I think there are many, many blockchains that have already done that. And to be frank, most of the workload that we're seeing in the crypto and blockchain space today probably are not looking for another faster chain, right? Yeah. The reality is a lot of the TPS, the transaction per second that many of the blockchain, including Algorand, have been able to accomplish, it's more than enough for what we need to do today. So the challenge within crypto, or in the broader sense, digital assets, it's really much more around how do you get access to these applications and the related assets that are being created within these layer ones. Now, many in the audience right now, or maybe listening to this later, may be saying, well, aren't there things that are called bridges, right? There are crypto bridges, blockchain bridges that are bringing value from one to another. Now, if you think about it, though, let's take a step back and think about the word bridge, right? You and I know as bridge in the physical world, as in you're taking people or goods from one side to another. And usually the bridge is crossing some sort of hurdle, right? And so you're taking it from point A to point B, and hopefully you get there safely. The interesting thing about crypto bridges as they are built today, we're not really moving things from one side to another. We're actually creating contracts, right? That mimic the goods on both sides, and then we're stacking that contract on top of the bridge. So essentially, the bridge ceased to exist as a transportation mechanism, but rather it is a place where you're parking things. Now, to me, that sounds more like a warehouse than a transportation device, right? That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Now, of course, there's lots of nuances and different type of implementations, but at the end of the day, bridges is a intermediary way of solving interoperability issues that we have today between L1s. But we like to think about it as, if it's an intermediary solution, then what are better solutions out there that can potentially give you that universal access, right? You have assets and applications that are created in different layer ones. Can you create something that give you access in a very consistent way so that you don't have discrepancies across your various different access methods, whether it's through a wallet or through some browser-based extensions or whatever it is? So that is the premise of why we created the Odyssey network, is to solve that problem, to create consistency around how you get access to your different assets, but more importantly, in a completely decentralized and trustless way. Now, why is that second part important? Well, I think if Ian and I have this conversation 6 months or 9 months ago, we would probably have said, well, you can get access to multi-chain assets using many centralized solutions out there. There are centralized wallets or exchanges and so on and so forth that allows you to do so. Well, fast forward to November 2022, you and I are probably thinking, well, is centralization the way to go? And actually, isn't the whole notion of public network in a blockchain scenario meant to be decentralized anyways, right? But we had to lean towards a lot of the centralized way of doing things because those were the only solutions that were available that give you access to multi-chain assets. Yeah. So what we're creating here is a decentralized network, public network run by a consensus, right? Just like many of the layer ones out there. But our whole goal is to create this mechanism that allows you to then use this network to access your assets on different chain and then be able to policy manage it and potentially be able to transfer all of those as a portfolio rather than asset by asset. So in some sense, we're kind of breaking the paradigm in terms of how assets are being viewed on individual blockchain today. We are actually saying, there are ways that you can do everything that you enjoy in a centralized manner today, but done in a decentralized manner. So that's what we're really gearing for the Odyssey network to really build.
Yeah, and it's important, and I feel it myself, right? And the two main wallets that I use are MetaMask, and then the Coinbase self-hosted wallet. And but if I want to buy this digital asset, I need to download the Zilliqa wallet. If I want to buy something else, I need to download Trust. I need to download Phantom. So that is just me, right? And an individual being able to access all of my digital assets across one wallet, right? But when you think about the institutional context of being able to manage this and manage different signing policies, managing different things at different times of day for who can access what, right? If you're doing that across multiple wallets, that is an operational risk screaming at you from a trading perspective. And as more and more assets move into this space, become digital assets, we're going to have a heck of a lot of wallets to have to deal with when we have institutional trading of digital assets. That it sounds like, with your background, Sean, where you came from, then being CEO of the Algorand Foundation, that you probably have some institutional visions on this, that, as part of the overall roadmap, as well as solving those problems for me as an individual holder of digital assets, right?
I do. So before I talk about the kind of the institutional aspect, let me clarify one thing first, because some of the audience might be thinking, okay, so the Odyssey network is a decentralized wallet. It is not a decentralized wallet. Because most of us, when we think about wallets, we're thinking about some sort of an interface, right? You mentioned MetaMask, right? That's an interface, primarily towards the Ethereum-based assets. So what we're creating on Odyssey, and specifically a new blockchain primitive that we're calling D-Wallet, the decentralized wallet, is that it is a primitive that lives on chain. This is the mechanism that holds the access towards your assets that are sitting on different chain, right? It is a primitive. Now, the goal of this, though, is for us to work with different partners, whether they're existing technology provider that's already out there today, custodian provider, exchanges, wallet providers, or new platforms and new innovators that want to actually create something on top of the Odyssey network, leveraging this primitive. Now, why is this important? And this is relevant towards the questions that or the point that you were trying to make before, both from a retail and institutional perspective. What we're trying to create here is for any owner, whether the owner is an individual user like you and I, or an institution or a family office that have a portfolio of assets, but managing it for their clients or for their behalf. What we're saying here is the D-Wallet, this primitive, becomes that universal access points toward all of them, right? But what that also means is your policies, things like spending limits, who can access what, when, and how, which trading venue can you actually go access, how many ETH per transaction can you actually go up to? Are you a regulated industry? Thereby, you can only trade in a regulated exchange rather than the other way around. All of these policies should be done on the blockchain layer so that you only have to set that once. And you don't have to set it on every single app and every single platform that you need to use. That is the key towards what we're trying to do. In a sense, what we're saying here is wallets, as we know today, mostly are being viewed as an application or an interface. What we're trying to do here is to say, actually, wallets can actually be building blocks for new applications, right? This building block then gives you access to the different applications that are sitting on different chain. But more importantly, you set your policy once. So think about it, right? Let's say you and I, Pete, right? You and I owns a company, right? We're 50-50 equal partners, but you're the CEO, I'm the CFO, let's say, yeah? So you have a higher spending limit than I do. You and I co-own a D-Wallet. We would then be able to say, all of these policies and access controls and everything else that between the two of us are already mandated at the wallet level. So when we go and sign transaction and paying something or transferring value out of our wallet out, there's only so much I can do. There's so much that you can do, regardless of which interface or custodian provider or exchange that we're trying to use, right? That's really the power here. You set it once, and you'll be able to have the service providers that are actually managing your assets respect the policies and respect the access control that you have set, rather than the other way around. Like, you think about it. When I was running Algorand, we were working with multiple custodian providers, and we needed to, right? Risk diversification, just proper business practice. But every single one of them have different multi-sig, they have different whitelisting rules, insurance policies, all of that stuff. Wouldn't it make sense for me to set that once and then be able to just say, hey, here's my policy. You can see it on my wallet. It's literally right here on chain, and there's a wallet contract that dictates what it is. Just expose that into your interface and then allow me to leverage your service. That's a paradigm shift. That's why it's quite different. I wanted to make sure we spend a minute or two explaining exactly what that is, because this is, I don't want people to think, oh, Odyssey is another decentralized wallet app. No, actually, it's a decentralized wallet that lives on a blockchain.
It's a primitive. It's a primitive.
It's a primitive. Yeah.
It absolutely, and it is dripping with one of my favorite words in Web3, which is composability, right?
Right.
Which,
Right.
which is being a Lego block in the midst of all this. And one of the things that Hugh McGurr, who's with
Mhm.
me as on the investment team within the Techstars Web3 program, and he's putting the finishing touches on the thesis. One of the things that I added humbly to that was Lego snot, right? Which, if you are a Lego enthusiast, you know that snot
Right.
doesn't mean what you think it means. It's studs not on top. And
That's
that
right.
when I think about composability, I think about not just one Lego block on top of the other,
Mhm.
building up, 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 and up, but it's building out
Yeah.
in multiple directions. And you need those studs on the sides of the Lego
Right.
block in order to build in multiple directions. And it sounds like what you're explaining here, Sean, that it is very much building out in multiple directions and allowing these access points in from
Mhm.
multiple levels, which is pretty cool. And that is, I think that is in a nutshell, accessibility within Web3. You need to be incredibly flexible. You need to be
Yep.
able to come in multiple points, in multiple directions, and multiple dimensions, but also be incredibly safe and secure.
So this is an interesting point, and I've started to say this quite a bit when I go on shows like this. If you think about it, right, you need to be incredibly flexible, exactly to your point, so you can let your imagination run wild in terms of what this next phase of crypto and blockchain application could look like. So that's obviously very true. At the same time, you also want to be quite restrictive depending on the use case, right? So, when we talk to, DAO providers, gaming guilds, a lot of these more Web3 related platform owners, what they're actually saying is, wow, this is actually interesting. So if I'm running a DAO, I no longer have to be restricted within a particular ecosystem. I could now accept stake that are coming from assets from different ecosystem. I could realistically start from day one with a multi-chain DAO, because that DAO is essentially just running a D wallet, and the D wallet then dictates what type of asset it can actually receive and also send out. And then you can have a voting mechanism inside of it that is not restricted to only a native token that belongs to one particular ecosystem. That completely changes how things are being done. Now, if you think about it though, that is not unheard of in the real world. You think about any company, right? You and I both run companies. We have assets that are coming from different places. We have currencies that we have in our bank accounts that come from different countries, so to speak. We're never restricted to any single currency. But why are DAOs today built that way? Well, because they're pretty restrictive in that sense, and that's part of the evolution. So we want to push that border towards the next phase, which is now allowing DAOs to be able to operate in a multi-chain fashion on day one. And the same thing with things like gaming guilds, right, or metaverses.
Yeah.
Why should they be locked into a single ecosystem? They shouldn't. Like, think about these guilds, right, that have dozens or hundreds of gamers. They're not all playing the same game. They're playing lots and lots of games that are created on different blockchains. And when it comes to collecting and curating a portfolio, what the guild's value look like, it's impossible to do, right?
Yeah.
They have so many wallets here and there that and who's working on what and who belongs to where and so on and so forth. If you're able to bring all of that together using the D wallet on the Odyssey network, boom, all of that in automatically becomes available. I'll give you one more, right? NFT collectors, right? Think about a new OpenSea that have two additional functions. One, that NFT could be from any chain, right? Not just from the select few. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, what if I've collected a bunch of like-minded, the NFTs from different chain, and I want to sell my entire portfolio or transact my entire portfolio? Now, again, you can't do that on existing platforms, but we could do that in the real world. Like when you go to Christie's or these auction houses, you can get a whole collection. It doesn't have to be item by item all the time. So we're really trying to think about all these real world use cases that right now may be restricted by the fragmentation within the L1s and the technical kind of incompatibility between the different ecosystem. And we're trying to say, actually, we can bring it all together, right? We don't replace everything else. That is not the goal. Our goal is to actually bring things together. Now, that's on the Web3 side, right? So you can already, like, I could see you're probably thinking about all kinds of different use cases.
I am.
But think about the institutions. The institutions, when I talk to them, they're actually saying, Sean, all of those is phenomenal, but we're a regulated industry. There are rules that we have to play by. Digital asset is just yet another asset class that we're making available for our clients to get access to. There are rules that we have to follow. They may be about risk exposure. They may be about investment appetite. They may be tax related, jurisdictional related, compliance, regulation, all of that. All of these are nicely mapped out, right? You came from the banking industry. I spent 20 years working with Wall Street banks. So if you think about that, that is not a bad thing. These are, protection mechanisms that regulated industries live in. Well, you know what? D-Wallet also allowed them to do that as well. You can now actually say, let's create new digital asset products, put these guardrails within the D-Wallet that maps to your existing rules that you're already doing for other assets. And then now when you offer a new product to your customer, you're basically offering them a predefined, rules-based D-Wallet that they can hold their asset in. But here's the key thing. That D-Wallet is controlled by the customer themselves. They sign transaction. This is completely non-custodial. So you're kind of solving two problems with one stone, which is the non-custodial problem that we're continuing, not problem, the non-custodial transition that we're rapidly seeing right now, but at the same time still having this respectful, respect in terms of rules that's already been set within the company or within a certain jurisdiction. So D-Wallets actually have a lot of flexibility to both serve the Web3 space, which is let your imagination run wild and push the space to the next era. And then also in the traditional space that are getting into digital assets, putting the guardrails around it so that we can actually let this industry continue to prosper.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's very reminiscent of this innovation from, I don't know, post-Lehman, even before Lehman back in, the turn of the millennium of this thing in the hedge fund industry called managed accounts or separately managed accounts, where what that did was it put the control back in the investor's hands. Now, it was still clunky through signatures and paper and, faxes and whatever back in 2001 that turned into emails in 2012. But it's critically important to, again, the institutionalization of digital assets. But the one that I'm thinking of that is probably going to be the most meaningful to me, at least right now or in the next few years, is my kids, right? And that, like you said, playing games across different networks, different channels, and the digital assets that they collect across those different games, being able to control them in one place, right? And we're not yet going to be at the stage where you could take your Nike digital runners and bring them, from Sandbox into Decentraland and put a VR headset on and see them rendered on your feet by looking down. We're not there yet, but you know what? Right. We still at least will have that recognition that you do hold that asset and you can see that across multiple chains.
Exactly.
Cool.
Let me take a minute to tell you more about our sponsors. SecuriCentrix strives to be the trusted partner that secures your information assets deemed critical for your business. SecuriCentrix also delivers the highest level of security expertise and support to their clients. Even further, SecuriCentrix provides independent cybersecurity assessments and advisory against best practice industry standards and compliance frameworks. Working as an extension of your team, SecuriCentrix helps you recognize and control data risks to your business by understanding your level of risk. In short, SecuriCentrix provides many solution offerings from assessment and advisory, managed security services, cloud and infrastructure validation, vulnerability management and testing, and payment security. Get in touch with the team at securicentrix.com to learn more, or email info@securicentrix.com. That's SecuriCentrix.com.
And I like the fact that, Pete, you don't really say crypto assets, you just say assets or digital asset. And I lean towards the same terminology as well. Crypto is but one aspect of digital assets, right? Stablecoins, CBDCs, tokenized assets, whether they're real world physical assets or not, these are inevitable, right? This is the directions that we're all going into. Certainly, we're going through some sort of hiccup at the moment, a pretty big one, but it has more to do on the speculative trading aspect and quite frankly, just corporate governance, right? But inevitably, the technology, the innovation, and the digitization of assets across the world doesn't stop. So we need to think about creating new mechanism that allows you to have proper access to those, and that's really the aspirations that we have here.
Awesome. And speaking of the youth, right, and those that are at the beginning of their journey now and the early stage founders, how do you think they should be thinking about accessibility? When you're talking to them, and I know you do some mentorship of founders, what direction are you pointing them in with this?
One thing that I remind them of, that is the pace of technical innovation continues to accelerate. Nowhere do we see that faster than here. I mean, when I was in the cloud computing stage, we used to say, oh my God, cloud is moving so much faster than everything else, right? And then now that we're in crypto and blockchain, I mean, oh my God, cloud was cloud's a long time ago, right? As far as I'm concerned. So if you think about that, one thing that I'm not saying this to young founders to scare them. I actually want to encourage them that the fact that it is moving so quickly, that just means that they need to keep their eyes open. They need to learn as much as they can, and they need to have the audacity or the courage to pivot at any moment in time, right? Who would have knew, 2-3 weeks ago, we have this massive debacle happen in crypto, right? I mean, we already have 6 months.
What are you talking about?
What debacle? I mean, if you think about it, we knew it was happening. Right? We knew it was happening. Those of us that have come through the financial crisis, one wave doesn't just get covered up right off the bat. There's another wave, and I would argue we're not done with it yet. The reality is that shouldn't deter you from getting into this space if you truly believe in the potential of the technology and this digitization of assets, right? This phase, if it's not something that you truly believe in, maybe this is not the place to get into at this moment in time. However, if you truly believe it, I think many people would have said bear markets are the best time to build. And if you've got the ability to raise some funds, find like-minded team members where you put your heads down and build and find a problem that you are solving, which will take us, the entire industry, to the next phase, then I would encourage them with both of my hands up, right? And I would ask my friends to go support them as well. I think it's important for all of us to continue to band together and look at the potential and look at the reality of where we are, and then trying to navigate accordingly, rather than just having cold feet or looking at this industry purely because of the ridiculous speculations that has happened the last 2-3 years and say, hey, this is a get rich quick industry and I'm going to come in and come out. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. That is not what innovation is all about. And especially in this space, that is the wrong mentality to take.
I know. And it's one of the things we look for in founders. One of the big things we look for in founders, Sean, is deep firsthand experience of the problem you're solving. And given that crypto and digital assets, the blockchain space in general, is basically 13 and a bit years old, that deep firsthand experience is, with a number of people that have come into this space, it's kind of hard to find people who have deep firsthand experience of the problem they're solving. So you need to really buffet that with a strong belief and a vision for where this is all headed. So it's almost that backwards looking, I do have good experience in solving this problem, but I also have a strong vision as to where this is all going, and almost a bit of a prescience really with their view on the market and where this is going. We've got a good question here from Anna, and she is saying, what is your vision in making Web3 accessible and easy to use? And I think what we're talking about here is still, one measure says there's 2.5 million users of Web3, and that's just a calculation of daily active users of NFTs. And then there's 250 to 300 million crypto wallets, which, as we've talked about, is just one component of digital assets and one component of Web3, but it is the biggest proportion of that right now. So moving from 2.5 million to 250 million to 1 billion and making Web3 universally accessible. A lot of what you're working on is a big driver of that, but
What about that singular user experience that really is going to make this incredibly simple for people?
So I would probably look at it in a three-part, right? If you can kind of see my hand waving here. I look at it as a three-part thing. There is the interface, that's primarily the user experience aspect. There is the infrastructure, which has to do with the structural aspect, the management aspect, and the security aspect. And then you have the broader ecosystem that needs to go support that. Now, what do I mean by that? If the interface is not easy or as easy as some of the mobile apps that we are used to, then the uptake will never really get there. We've always seen that, right? This has nothing to do with digital asset as an industry. This is any type of application-centric interface that we're getting access to, especially on the mobile or web devices. User experience is always key. So the issue with user experience today, that at least from my personal experience, is that because these user interfaces are not only doing the interface aspect, but they're also doing the infrastructure, right? They are the one actually integrating the different chains and the smart contracts and all of that and connecting into different exchanges. They're doing everything. So if you've got a limited resources and you're trying to fight in a very fragmented but very crowded market as well, then there's only so much you can do. So most of the implementation out there, what we do see is that you either have interesting interface, but it doesn't do as much as people would want to be, because they have to divert a lot of resources to also say, hey, look, we support 10 chains, right? And integration is not easy, right? It is not easy to do. So that's kind of the dilemma that we continue to face today.
Okay.
And if you're able to decouple that and make sure you have infrastructure that allows for those that are actually really good in UI UX and be able to just plug right into it, then you really then be able to leverage the talent that you get from the user interface aspect and also the technology engineering and the infrastructure side. You don't have to bundle everything together. I think we see a lot of that today, and that's probably one reason where adoption is not as readily available. Like managing keys, whether it's multi-sig or MPC or all of these things, it's just not easy to do. Like you try to explain what MPC is to most people, they're like, what?
Yeah.
No one understands what that is. And then some applications say, oh, you know what? You don't have to manage that. You can just use your Facebook ID. Really? Would you trust an application that just says use your Google or Facebook ID and then you can log in? Come on. So it's hard, right? So that's that inner circle, so to speak, right? The application interface, the UI UX, decoupling that with the infrastructure. And obviously we at the Odsy team, we're really focusing on the infrastructure aspect. So to be able to decouple that, I think makes a big difference. Now, ecosystem. Even just having that decoupling without the ecosystem to support it, that still becomes really difficult, right? You have all these amazing applications and services, both in the real world and in the Web3 world, that people are getting access into now. If you're not able to connect and support or be supported by the broader ecosystem, then it's still a moot point. People don't, like, I don't know if you saw this, Pete, the other day. There were some analysis done on the two largest metaverse, right? Decentraland and Sandbox, in terms of average daily usage, right? And I mean, the numbers are pretty low, right? Pretty low. There's a reason for that, right? It's interesting when you first get in, but then if you run out of things to do, then people just stop coming back until there's another new thing that you can do, and then they'll go in and spend some time, and then they'll pull back again. So that broader ecosystem becomes very important. How do you build that ecosystem, connect into as many applications and services and platforms as possible, so that incredible interface that you build, supported by that very robust infrastructure that have been established as well, then actually have some way to maximize its potential, right? So that's really what I would be looking at in terms of building that. And quite frankly, that's what we're going to be doing as well, is building that ecosystem. But we're not going to go into this mindset where it is our ecosystem, we're the best, our chain is the best. No, remember, our goal is to bring together. So we want to be working with all the layer one ecosystems and be able to say, hey, there are different ways that you can do things where you can still leverage a lot of the amazing work that you've done in ecosystem A or B, but now you can really maximize all of that. And that's going to be our narrative, and that's our story.
Yeah, I love that. And it's got this analogy going into my mind. And I love my analogy, Sean. And you've mentioned a
Hmm.
few good ones already, but that separation of the user interface from the infrastructure, that's critically important because, like you said, everything, most of what we see out there right now for the interface in terms of holding digital assets and trading digital assets, that those are actually infrastructure providers. And it's almost like saying, well, we're going to take the engineer who designed the electric engine of a Tesla, and we're going to ask them to also design the instrumentation panels, right?
Yeah.
And how the user actually engages with operating their car, operating their Tesla, right? You don't do that. But the reality of where we are in this space right now in digital assets means that it's kind of the only option. So I think what I'm hearing from you is that you can put a user interface on top that would be able to interact across multiple chains, and whether you do it or whether somebody else does it, because this is Web3, this is open source, this is composable, that we've got that option. So I think the message is to founders then in thinking about accessibility in Web3 is that, okay, look for those other Lego blocks that you can build on top of. If you are truly hell-bent on solving this problem of bringing a much better user experience that is still balancing convenience and security and, you know, and safety, then look for those primitives that can enable you to actually not have to build the infrastructure, and that you can just build a layer on top of that. You can build that instrumentation panel and do that in a safe, secure manner that gives the end user control and gives them that sense of safety and security.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes that when people ask me, you know, is Odyssey a layer one? And I say, yeah, it is a layer one because it's being built as a layer one. But the more you think about what we're doing, some people have said, hey, you know, Sean, maybe you guys should call it layer X, right? It's not a layer one because it's connecting all the other layer ones, all the ecosystem. So the X could be stand for, you know, cross, right? Cross compatibility. It could also be, you know, that X factor that allows you to have that universal access, right? You know, we'll take whatever analogies are interesting, you know, interesting
I got one.
we can take, but
yeah, I got one. So when I first moved to Ireland, the X Factor show with Simon Cowell and all the others was a big thing, and the group One Direction came together that way, and because Simon Cowell said, okay, well, you as individual components aren't that interesting, but if we turn you to Lego blocks and connect all of you five together, you create a much more interesting thing. So composability, as pop stars, is equivalent to composability in Web3. So, but listen, with the whole idea around advocacy and collaboration, Sean, that with the Crypto Council for Innovation that you're involved with A16Z, with Gemini, with Block, with Fidelity, with Coinbase, that I expect is a pretty good platform to reach the policyholders, to reach the educational institutions, as you mentioned, to really help to scale this whole space in the public eye. How is that progressing with the Crypto Council for Innovation?
So it is progressing ridiculously rapidly. And I would emphasize on the word ridiculous, right? And it's in a very good way. The council, just for those that may be interested, the Crypto Council for Innovation, or CCI, is a global alliance. And it was put together by some of the names that you mentioned before, some of the largest industry players in the space, for the specific purpose of education, advocacy, and also research. Now, what we are primarily focusing on is working with policymakers in different jurisdictions, US, Europe, here in Asia as well, to understand the nuances towards where digital asset is heading, what each one of the policymakers may be looking at in terms of standardization across the board, and also more importantly, collaboration and direct engagements between policymakers, right? You and I both realize blockchain is a global network, right? This from day one has this notion of cross-borderness built in, if that's even a word, right? But that was the whole purpose of, many would say, what Satoshi kind of wrote the paper about. So this cross-border notion of value exchange and transactional capture. So regulators, realize that. So they are monitoring each other, they're talking to each other, they're collaborating. And part of what we are looking to really accomplish at CCI is to be able to be in the middle of those conversations. So we can be a facilitator, and we can also be able to bring forward some of the industry's recommendation in regards to how things should progress in the future. So I think it's given us a lot of visibility in terms of where the regulators are thinking. And again, it's not just on crypto assets, it's on digital assets across the board. There are stablecoin regulations that are coming out from different parts of the world. Obviously, there are huge notion of where CBDC or central bank digital currency are actually happening around the world as well. And it'll take some time. Regulation is always slow. But I think we're starting to get to that point now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're nearly at the point in time to wrap this up, but we got two quick questions left. Okay. One from Elvis from MetaHigh, and he's saying, what about 3D assets in the metaverse? Should they be tokenized?
I will leave it as this. Anything can be tokenized, but just because it's tokenized doesn't mean it actually hold any intrinsic value. So just think about that. Does it need to be tokenized? And what's the value and the purpose of tokenizing it? I think depending on what it is, people have different answers.
Yeah, like you and I had talked about before, Sean, in terms of tokenizing the holocrons that are used in Star Wars by bounty hunters, right? Of course, those have value.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
We need to get there. We need to absolutely get there.
One day we'll get there.
We will. Last question I'm going to ask you, Sean, what is it that you look for in Web3 founders?
Do I look for? Look, I am one myself now, but I've also done my fair of investing in Web3 projects as well. I'm always looking for passion, but experience combined together, right? Passion in terms of what they're trying to do and solving a problem, hopefully, not just making things faster and cheaper. I think those are interesting, but unless the being faster and cheaper solves a particular business problem, it is just trying to, enhance an existing thing that's already out there. So it's not that much more exciting as far as I'm concerned. So solving a particular problem, but having the passion to see it through. But then, like you said before, right, having the experience to actually pull it off, like having the passion, but then just thinking out, thinking very big vision, but then not really knowing how to do it. It is hard, right? This industry moves so fast. The idea isn't really worth anything unless you're able to go implement and execute it. So having that passion to see it through is really, really important. And I don't think it's just crypto industry that we're talking about this from a founder and innovation is concerned. But then because of the speed at which crypto is happening and it's truly global, just coming up with an idea is not enough, right? Having that passion to see it through, that is going to be important. And having the experience to back it up, then that will give the investor the confidence that you actually know what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I know. And I love that passion and experience, and that, that experience can come from multiple different avenues, right? It doesn't need to just be in the crypto and blockchain space, but
for sure,
because generally the problems that people are solving are wider and broader than that.
Yeah.
But listen, Sean, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on to the show today to help us with this, and that to remind everyone out there that applications are open for the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. They will be open until February 1st. Please check out our Techstars Web3 website to get information on the types of founders we're looking for, the types of projects that we're thinking about, but we're keeping it quite broad and general, like I mentioned at the beginning, working with entrepreneurs, building the decentralized internet and tokenized economies, right? So that is it in a nutshell. And Sean, I know we're going to be talking more, and this is just the beginning rather than the end. So thank you again, and really look forward to seeing where things go with this. And best of luck, and we'll be cheering on from the sidelines.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be on the show. I see lots of people still having questions and inquiries and whatnot. Certainly very happy to talk about them offline as well. Peter, if you don't mind, I'll just leave our website on. I'll just mention that here. So it's Odsy. Odsy.xyz. So very simple to remember, Odsy.xyz. We have our light paper there. We also have a contact us form. If there's anything that you would like to work with us on, any questions, feel free to hit us up. My Twitter handle is also very easy to remember. Crypto Sean Lee. That's it. Crypto Sean Lee. So look me up. Love to connect with whoever that's out there that wants to collaborate and work on things together.
Absolutely. So thanks to everyone for joining the audience, and look forward to hearing from you. Best of luck as everyone moves forward. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to Sean Lee for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Links to get in touch with Sean and also connect with the Techstars Web3 Accelerator in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. So check us out online. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early stage startup investor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, drop me a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!